a nigga not learning. I be spending money if a nigga not earning. Catch me in the back seat if I'm not stirring. And I be rolling up if a nigga not.
So the Lions, new coach for the Lions. They added Matt Patricia, defensive coordinator of the Patriots for a number of years. So you know the defense is going to be good. And thinking back to last year, the defense was pretty good at times. You know, when you think about the Lions, you know, they let me think back. They started the year off pretty good, and then they lost a couple games in a row. Then they went another streak, lost a couple games, won a couple, lost one, won one. So they're 9-7. They're a mediocre team. I don't think they made the playoffs. They made the playoffs 2 years ago with 9 wins. So this team is one of those like right on the cusp of making the playoffs, right there every year, you know. And they have a good quarterback in Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, you know, when you think about Matt Ryan and you think about Matthew Stafford and you think about them both being number 1 overall picks, and you say, you know, Matthew Stafford, he's honestly been on a pretty shitty team for multiple years. He's getting it going, you know, and a lot of things too. It's like when what's his name, Calvin Johnson left the Lions. You really thought that Matthew Stafford was going to implode and that his career was going to be over, and him leaving has done nothing but made Matthew Stafford better. It's made Matthew Stafford have to nut up and really figure out of going elsewhere, not just, you know, looking at Calvin Johnson every fucking play. I feel like he's grown a lot the last couple years since he lost Calvin Johnson. And, you know, I think the Lions have done a good job of putting some talent around him. You know, they know that he is like, you know, back when they drafted him in 2009 or 2010, they're like, this is going to be our guy for the next 10 years. And, like, all we have to do is build around him. Like, and they've kind of done that very well. You know, when you talk about Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, those guys at wide receiver, T.J. Jones, Kenny Golladay, they've put a pretty good receiving core together for him. Golden Tate is a slot monster. Marvin Jones has really came in as a Z-type receiver, you know. And, you know, Kenny Golladay is a tall guy. And we'll see if he can stay healthy this year, if he can make more of an impact. But I like what the direction that the Lions are going. It's kind of like the Bears. It's just there's some big monsters kind of standing in the way with the Vikings and the Packers. Now, you know, Matt Patricia, maybe he can get this defense right, and you know, maybe he can figure out Aaron Rodgers, maybe he can figure out the Vikings offense, and maybe that can be the difference, and maybe the Lions can get over that hump. But, you know, thinking back to history and just thinking back and how the Lions have always been, the chances of that happening aren't very likely. So let's talk about the offensive line for a minute. Taylor Decker, Graham Glasgow, Frank Ragnow, rookie out of Arkansas. I like that. I like him a lot. That was their first pick. TJ Lang and Ryan Wagner. So one of the big issues last year for the Lions was the ability to run the ball. They had the backs in place. They thought they had an offensive line in place that was going to help Stafford out. But in reality, they really didn't. They ended up using Theo Riddick out of the backfield to catch short little passes most of the year because that was really the only thing they were doing. So they still have Amir Abdullah and Theo Riddick, the two guys that were kind of going to be the guys last year, but they've also added some guys. Kerryon Johnson's a guy that went for second round in the draft, and Kerryon Johnson was my number 2 or 3 running back. I think that he was very balanced. He had good power, but he also could get out and catch passes and get outside. I thought that he had a good ability to move side to side, and I felt like, you know, he did have some injuries in his career early on, but they weren't major knee injuries or major type of injuries that made him have to rehab a lot. So, he's relatively young. I think he's only like 19 or 20. He's not that old of a guy. And he has good size, and he has the ability to add more size to him because I don't think he's fully developed yet. So I think Kerryon Johnson was a really good pick. And my thing for the Lions last year, I thought the defense was good. The secondary was awesome. The linebackers hold their own, and the defensive line did good. It was the offense, and the offensive line in the running game was the issue. You knew that Stafford was going to be able to check into certain plays, and you knew that he was going to be able to move the ball to an extent, but they had no offensive line, or they didn't have a good offensive line, injuries or whatever, and then they had no running game because they really had no running back. They had these two kind of third down, get outside, catch pass type backs in Abdullah and Riddick. So I think Kerryon Johnson was a really good add to address the issues that they had, and then they also added LeGarrette Blount, which was another really good add, I thought. And it speaks to, the Lions won 9 games last year. We didn't make the playoffs. What do we need to do this offseason to make the playoffs? And they did it just that. They added the offensive line and they added the running backs. Now we talk about the defense. Let's talk about the secondary. Darius Slay, all he does is play hard. I love this kid. Very, very good cornerback. Nevin Lawson came into his own last year. Very good. Glover Quinn. Tavon Wilson. Very good secondary. These guys play really good as a unit. I like them a lot. Christian Jones, who came over from Chicago. Gerard Davis. And Devin Kennard. Kennard's a new free agent as well. He's from the Giants. And let's see about the defensive line. Sylvester Williams from Tennessee came over. That's a good add. Ziggy Ansah, a guy that's been here for a good amount of years. Ashawn Robinson out of Alabama a couple years ago. And then Anthony Zettel. I think Zettel played at Penn State. Kerry Hyder, a guy that tore his Achilles, I think, at the first year, was a guy that had really made an impact 2 years ago. We'll see if he can get back right. Deshaun Han is a guy they added in the 4th round out of Alabama, a DN. So they're learning. Get those defensive linemen from Alabama. Get those linebackers from Alabama. Those guys are real studs. And then Jeremiah Ledbetter is another guy on their defensive line. So their defensive line, even though they lost Ndamukong Suh a couple years ago, it's funny how good they've done at improving those positions where a major guy leaves. You talk about Calvin Johnson left. They added Tate, Marvin Jones, 2 guys that kind of took a chance on that have panned out. And then, their defensive line, Sylvester Williams, Ashawn Robinson, Deshaun Han, Ziggy Ansah, Anthony Zettel, Kerry Hyder, all guys that they've drafted. And, they've been able to replace Ndamukong Suh with these different talents. I think their linebacking core is a little weak, or not. It's not weak, but it was a little bit weak, and I think they did a good job of addressing it. Gerard Davis, I think he played at Florida. I don't want to be wrong though. Yeah, he played at Florida. He was drafted last year. Good player. He did good in his rookie season. He just didn't have the help around him. I think Devin Kennard and Christian Jones is going to be a good help to him. So let's talk about some other guys that they drafted. Tracy Walker, a safety out of Louisiana. I heard good things about him. Terrell Crosby, a tackle out of Oregon. And then Nick Badwin. Nick Badwin is my boy. I like Nick Badwin. I've seen a picture of him before he was a fullback, when he was like either a running back or a quarterback. This kid has put on so much weight to become a fullback. He's the guy that Rashad Penny, the running back out of San Diego State, this is the fullback that was in front of Rashad Penny throughout the year last year. I really like this kid. If they're going to go to a fullback type set, I like Nick Badwin. I thought it was funny that they drafted him as well. But anyways, maybe they're going to convert him to something else. He's 245, 6'2", but I like the kid a lot. Let's see here. So I don't know. It's just tough because I don't think the Lions are good. I don't think the Lions are as good as the Vikings, and I don't think the Lions are as good as the Packers. But at the same time, I think this is a good team. I think Matt Patricia is going to bring good game plans every week. I think maybe it might be tough because it's his first year. He's going to have a lot of new responsibilities. That might be tough. But I feel like, the game-to-game operations aren't going to be that tough when you have Matthew Stafford, who can hold his own and can, really, I think he has a hone on the players on the team that he can, kind of collect them together. But anyways, it's just tough because of that, because of the Packers and the Vikings. That's going to be the real test. Are the Lions good enough to compete with the Vikings and the Packers throughout the year? Because if they're not, then they're not going to be there at the end of the year. And that's kind of been what has always happened the last couple of years, is either the Vikings or the Packers beat the shit out of the Lions, and then the Lions don't make the playoffs because of it. They're a game out or 2 games out, which you win one or 2 of those games, they win. They get in. Now they did beat Green Bay last year. No Aaron Rodgers. They beat Minnesota at the first of the year, week 4. I think that was the week Dalvin Cook got hurt. Let's see. They lost to Minnesota the second game, and they beat Green Bay that last game 35-11. So they did play good against Green Bay last year, but one of those games that Rodgers wasn't there, and so I don't know. We'll see what happens. Team needs that I thought this last season for the Lions. A 215 power back. So I thought a power back was a must because they have all these slot guys, LeGarrette Blount. They did that. Offensive line depth. They did that. Frank Ragnow was a good ad. Let's see. Draft defense, outside linebackers, cornerbacks, D-line. I think they did all of that. They drafted at least one of all of those. And then draft a tight end or bring in a tight end. So let's look at their tight end situation. Tight end situation, Luke Wilson. Okay, so they added Luke Wilson from Seattle. He was a guy that kind of overshadowed because Jimmy Graham, but it wasn't like, oh, we're going to get rid of Luke Wilson because they knew Luke Wilson would just beat him, somewhere else. So I think Luke Wilson was a good ad. I think he's a guy that, if him and Stafford can get a good chemistry, but I think the biggest thing was just bringing someone in like I've always said, like you want a security blanket, and Eric Ebron was not a security blanket for Stafford. So I think Luke Wilson's a good ad. I don't know how impactful, he's going to be. I think he'll be an all right player. But yeah, I think, tough for the, they lost Tariq Whitehead. They lost DJ Hayden in free agency, Paul Worlow, Travis Swanson. Haloti Ngata. They lost a good amount of people this last season, but they also added a good amount. Eric Ebron, Darren Fells, Brandon Copeland. But yeah, Paul Worlow and Tariq Whitehead were good linebackers. I forget about them. But, Worlow's already tore his ACL. He's out for the year. Tariq Whitehead, I think, will be a good player for Oakland. And then I'm trying to see if there's anybody else that I forgot. Deshaun Shedd, they added him from Seattle, pretty good player. Wesley Johnson, O-line from the Jets. Jonathan Freeney, linebacker from New Orleans. So, I don't know. We'll see with the Lions, but I don't think that they're as good as the Packers, and I don't think they're as good as the Vikings. So, I think it's going to be tough for them to make the playoffs.
All in. Got your bitch panties, Niagara falling. Dollars come like I'm fucking the bank. I told them I could, they told me I can't. They want me to trip when I dunk in the paint. I'm popping champagne and I'm puffing on dang. Shining hard.